What's up, everybody? It's Spencer Alessi, and this is the Esports Narrative. What is CODGamepedia? What has contributed to Call of Duty being the #1 console esport right now? What's another Call of Duty team besides Team Kaliber that could have a Cinderella story brewing? What Call of Duty squads should we be looking out for in 2018? Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome to episode 43 of the Esports Narrative. I am your host, Spencer Alessi, and this is the podcast that's all about the exploration of competitive video gaming and the passionate communities that make it so exciting. Tonight's guest is Brendan, aka Brendo TGB on Twitter. He's a college student, memer, self-proclaimed nerd, an esports person. He's also a journalist for CODGamepedia and a former manager of Red Reserve CSGO. Brendo, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm real curious about how you got into video games and your origin story, for lack of a better word, and also how'd you get into esports?
Yeah, so my father and my older brother both play video games, and so like when when I was really young, I was probably like 4 years old. I actually played my first I would consider it playing like my first video game is what I always tell the story as, and it was actually Halo 1 on the original Xbox. Just like playing shoot 'em games with my dad and my brother, and then eventually like Halo 3 came out, and that's kind of when like I guess you could say that's the first game that I grinded was Halo 3 when the 360 came out. And so I really just grew up playing Halo mostly, Halo 1, 2, and 3, and then I started playing COD and COD 4, and doing stuff with that. But nothing like competitive, like just strictly like public matches and things like that. And then basically I was just kind of bouncing back and forth between the two, and basically just playing pubs with friends, things like that. Very casual until Call of Duty Ghosts, which is when I kind of learned about esports. Like I knew of it because of COD Champs and Black Ops 2, but I didn't really follow it. And then basically Call of Duty Ghosts Champs was the first event that I watched kind of as like a full-time esports fan, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And what did you think, like, the first time you were experiencing that or watching Champs, and like, do you remember any of the thoughts or feelings you had like going into that or going through that tournament?
Yeah, so so for me, getting into esports, especially through Call of Duty, I think I kind of have a very similar like kind of startup to most people, is that they found Call of Duty through Optic, in a sense. So like more specifically like Nadeshot and Scump, like I think there's a large population of our fan base that learned about competitive Call of Duty from those two, especially Nadeshot during that time. So I actually learned about esports from him. But I actually, during that event, found myself rooting for Team Envious a lot, because during that Champs, it was like Team Envious, like the story was that they had basically, I think it was a couple weeks before Champs, they had got Scump on their team. Like he had left Optic and then he went back to Optic, and then Envy ended up being like the team of nobodies essentially, or the team that of like four players that nobody wanted, and they ended up getting second at the whole event. So it was like I just remember rooting for them like the whole time, because it was like this crazy underdog story, and it was like just really sweet to watch.
Optic clearly has the biggest fan following of all of the console teams.
Yeah,
maybe even combined to some extent. Some would argue, but that's definitely makes sense to me to hear that a lot of that came from how big their brand was and their reach was and continues to be.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, of course, now Nadeshot has moved on to 100 Thieves, and he's doing that stuff too. And yeah, I mean, like the platform of console esports hasn't necessarily grown as massively as like obviously PC games and things like that has, but a lot of the orgs that started in like Call of Duty have since branched out and become like massive. So
Yeah, and that's a good point because like a lot of the orgs, like you said, it kind of started in that realm. You know, like Optic, they're known for being the console team. Now they've just branched out recently with CSGO and League of Legends and Dota and you know and Overwatch, but they started as a console team. You know, like a lot of these prolific teams, I mean, many of them started on console.
yeah, I mean, Envy and Faze Clan, obviously two pretty big esports organizations as well. Both started in Call of Duty, and then again, like I said before, 100 Thieves with Nade Shot, like they started in Call of Duty, obviously through him. So it's it's actually really great to see, just because when you've been following the scene, and it's funny because in esports, saying that you've been following the scene for 3 years seems like a long time to a lot of people because of
Yeah.
how fast it's grown, like in the past year and a half to like a full to 2 years. So but like seeing how far like all of those orgs especially have come since like that Call of Duty Ghosts, or since like COD Esports was like slowly on the come up. It's like it's actually pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, so I'm curious what you do for COD Gamepedia. Like you are a journalist. I'm assuming you're writing like wiki articles and stuff like that. But tell us a little bit about what you do with them.
Yeah, so for COD Gamepedia, I do a lot of like I basically just do content, right? So I do YouTube videos that we upload on my channel, and then repost them on their channel, things like that. I help do some stuff for 2Ks, and then basically just try to fill in wherever I can to help. Because the thing with COD Gamepedia is like our Twitter account, or the Twitter account was originally called CESN, but we decided to merge with the Wikipedia website because it was kind of just like a really good business move for both sides. Because obviously our Twitter account was fairly popular for like tweeting out updates and things like that on scores, especially during 2Ks. Like because during the 2Ks there's so many matches going on at one time
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people like would come to our Twitter account to see score updates and things like that. So we or so they kind of merged together with the Wikipedia page, and yeah, so it's all just worked out really well for everyone involved so far.
So, what's your favorite type of content that you make, either independently or for with COD Gamepedia? And what type of content do you like to consume as like a fan of esports?
So as far as content I like to make, most of the content that I make is centered around like just very similar to like Thorin style videos, like essentially like just talking to the camera and like, bringing up a topic and explaining into detail my opinion and things like that, and trying to bring light to the subject if I feel the subject is controversial anyway, or, so for Codpedia, I did a review video of pretty much every 2K that happened before CWL Dallas. So, I actually do very much enjoy doing those types of videos because, like I come from a background of loving, like just regular sports in general. Like obviously living in Ohio, like everyone in Ohio pretty much grows up an Ohio State Buckeye fan and things like that because of how big their reach is. Um, and of course now it's like Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron James, things like that. Like it's Ohio is a very sports centered or sports centric like city and
Mm-hmm.
state. Um, so growing up with that background of sports, like I could talk about sports and like hypotheticals in sports like all day, like I think a lot of people can. So and it's no different for me in esports. Like I could sit here and I could make a 5 hour video talking about Call of Duty rosters and players and things like that if I really wanted to. Of course, obviously I try to keep things short for video purposes, but
Mm-hmm.
the passion is there for sure. And then uh, I want to start doing some gaming content, but to be quite honest with you, I just haven't gone out and bought an Elgato or anything like that to capture
Mm-hmm.
gameplay for console. Obviously, because for Call of Duty, I would want to record stuff on PlayStation, things like that. and I've done some PC recordings, but nothing too serious at the moment. But I'm definitely considering getting into that soon to try to just grow my brand as a whole, instead of just being known as a journalist.
Mm-hmm. And what type of content do you like to consume as a fan? And like, what do you like? Do you like documentaries, highlights, commentaries? What do you like as a fan?
Yeah, so I brought it up before, but I'm a big fan of Thorne's videos, like podcasts and things that I can just kind of like sit around and listen to or whatever are really nice. Especially since the like part-time job that I have right now, I can plug in headphones. So like whenever I'm doing my job or whatever I'm doing for the day, or even if I'm just doing homework for school, I can just listen to a podcast, listen to Thorin or Richard Lewis or whoever it may be talk about whatever esport they're covering at the current moment. But then besides that, I watch like all kinds of gaming videos. I watch like Achievement Hunter, things like that. Just like funny comedy based videos as well.
Do you find that you're listening to podcasts more recently as opposed to previous years or previous weeks or months of like consuming gaming content?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. As I started to get into podcasts, like doing, or not necessarily doing podcasts, but doing those kind of videos myself, doing like journalistic videos and things of that nature, I've found myself watching and listening to them a lot more, just because I think I have I don't want to say an evolved appreciation, but certainly a different appreciation for the skills that it requires to do these kind of videos consistently.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. I mean, if you're doing something you like to see the approaches that other people take maybe or
Yeah.
different styles and kind of develop your own, in light of that.
Yeah, and it's really nice to watch others do essentially what you're trying to do that are more popular than you, just at the very least to gain inspiration. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a long line of people that we could both rattle off of like who is creating really good content that we admire, and it helps you as both a competitive sense of like, okay, I want to be at that level, and I can do this, and also like you said, an inspiration sense of, wow, look at what they're doing, like they're creating this awesome content, like I can reach those levels if I work hard and develop the skills to do that.
yeah.
So what are your long-term goals? Like, what do you want to do long-term? Is it esports forever? Like, what are you up to?
So right now, I'm gonna be just working and going to school. My plan is to when I graduate, or either before I graduate or when I graduate. I'm not entirely sure on the plan yet, but I'm gonna attend a broadcasting school to try to get like some sort of like certificate or degree in broadcasting of some kind, to do either like sports radio, something like that, or alternatively, I absolutely would want to do something in esports. I mean, I think like for me, a the dream would be to be a caster, whether that's Call of Duty or CS:GO, or like even a game that I don't necessarily play a lot. Like I don't really play League of Legends too much, but I even like if someone said like if I saw that there was going to be potential openings in like a 3 to 6 month period for League of Legends caster or something like that, I definitely would try to work hard and try to make my name try to make a name for myself in the community. Because I really would like want to cast. I think that's like kind of like my dream job, I guess. But it's a lot of hard work and it's a very competitive space. So that's kind of why I have my backup plan through college, getting a degree in like business and like communicative business.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's super fun. You see some of these historic casters with these insane moments and casting them, and it gives you the chills. It gives you the chills almost to hear them cast these plays and these matches. It would be a lot of fun to do that, I think.
Yeah, and I'd love to create a moment like that. I know like for me, like the one thing I always think about when I think about like wanting to become a caster is the call during MLG Columbus, the CS:GO major when Coldzera I don't know if you avidly watch CSGO, but I'm
Hmm.
sure you know about the COLDGamepedia clip where he hits the jumping double no scope. Like that clip for me, like every time I watch that clip and listen to the caster, like I just get crazy goosebumps thinking about it. Like, and that like when I watch that clip and when I hear the caster and I see the videos, because there's videos on YouTube you can find of the fans reacting to it, like
Hmm.
that's what gets me hyped to try to turn my dream into reality. Like seeing the fans go crazy, like seeing the casters go crazy, seeing the players go crazy, like all that, it just really motivates me.
Yeah, it's those awesome moments that really it like defines what esports really is and what it means to a lot of people. And the same goes for Call of Duty in these LAN events. It's just insane. Like this past Dallas was like, I think it was the biggest Call of Duty event ever, probably.
Yep, it was. It
And
was the most open bracket team, or the largest open bracket ever for a Call of Duty event.
it reaffirms that Call of Duty is the number one console esport right now. But I'm curious what you think has contributed to, I don't want to say their rise because I think they've been the number one for a while, but what do you think has contributed to their prolonged success of being the number one console esport right now?
Um, so for Call of Duty, it's kind of in a weird space because if you think about the other top esports, if you think about like CSGO, League of Legends, Dota, like all the things like that, all of those games are centered around competitive matchmaking. Where Call of Duty, like the majority of the Call of Duty player base, doesn't actively participate in competitive Call of Duty or like watch competitive Call of Duty. Um, so it's hard to say that Call of Duty has like grown rapidly because of the fact that the player base seems to like kind of consistently lie in the public match region. But I think the because of how big the overall player base is, it's kind of almost inevitable that it's going to consistently dominate console esports because like when I talk to people in the gaming community, like more specifically in the console gaming community, I could say, or even people not in the console gaming community, like people know that if you have a console, you most likely have a console for either a sports game or Call of Duty.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems to me that like it's almost to the point where Call of Duty is just all competitive. Like you said about matchmaking and stuff like that. It seems to me like Call of Duty is one of those games where no one plays it to kind of play casually. You know what I mean? Like it seems like it's an all competitive nature, and then the best of the best play at the highest level.
Yeah, it's leaning towards that. I think there's still a portion of the Call of Duty community that definitely is just like the casual player.
Hmm.
But I think like since Black Ops 2, it like when Black Ops 2 released League Play, that was like the big spike, I would say, and then it's slowly like exponentially gone up since then. And then I think it probably went down a little bit during Infinite Warfare just because that game was not very good to be quite honest with you. But
Hmm.
I think now that it's back with boots on the ground and back with World War II, there was so much hype for this game, and so far I think it's paid off for sure. As far as getting the numbers for competitive go up and just the player base population in general.
Well, you're a master of segues because that leads into what I wanted to talk about next was that exact thing with boots on the ground. There've only been two major tournaments in with World War II as far as the CWL is concerned. But how
Yeah.
do you think this is going to play out, this ground game? And do you think it seems like it's brought a lot of players back. It's brought a lot of hype and energy back to it, like you said. How do you think it's going to play out for the season? Do you think this is going to be something that kind of helps the Call of Duty scene move forward?
Um, yeah, so I think it definitely being a boots on the ground game, like I said before, not only does it make the total player base bigger, but I think it makes the viewership a lot better for these kind of events on Twitch, and I think people are more inclined to want to watch and compete in competitive Call of Duty because the game isn't is really fun to play, just in general, and so I think overall, this year I think is going to be really exciting. And obviously, so far it's already been really good. We've had two pretty solid events. And I think one thing, this is kind of controversial, I guess, but one thing that I think really helps drive the competitive viewership of Call of Duty is actually Optic losing, because Optic is supposed to win every event based on how good their team is. But when Optic is put in a situation where their back is against the wall, or you know, um, when Optic goes to a game 5, for example, and things like that, like you see the spike in viewership when Optic is in a situation where they have to either come back or is in a very nerve-wracking situation. You see the viewership spike like massively, and that's because obviously Optic has a huge following, but B, because people love to see their favorite players be in tough situations in games that are enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I love when Optic loses. I have nothing. I have nothing but respect for the players and the Oregon and everyone, but it's kind of one of those teams like the New England Patriots or something like that, where there's a lot of wagoning going on, and it's like you love to see the number one team just drop and like get wrecked.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like I know I've always said this before, but events where Optic loses, and it's kind of like after Optic loses, it's just a free for all for who can win the event. And I think those are actually some of the better events. Like obviously it's really nice when you can see Optic win like 3-0, 3-0, 3-0, 3-0, like all the way through the grand finals. It's like, okay, Optic is like the best team and they've shown it here again. But the best events, in my opinion, are the events where Optic lose kind of early, or they lose. Like even CWL Dallas was a really good example of it, because Optic, they did so well until they met TK, and TK obviously won the event, but TK steamrolled them, and then it was like, well, is Optic going to rebound? They beat Splice the first time, and then they lost to Splice, and then once it was TK and Splice in the finals, you're like, okay, well this is crazy, like this could go kind of any way.
I watched most of that, and it was a crazy run to see the Cinderella story of TK. And I believe I watched the video. You had a CWL Dallas pool reaction video, and in it, I'm pretty sure you predicted as TK as one of the teams to look out for that could possibly win. Tell me about that.
Okay, so TK, during all the online 2Ks, they had done really well. They had gotten top 8, I believe, in every single one. So, and this is a TK team who has not like really had a good roster, and it's basically been these players, and these players themselves, even not on this roster, have not really had good performances, like almost since Ghosts. So it was like kind of crazy that these 4 players who have struggled in jetpack games have just come back to boots on the ground and been like amazing. Outside of Kenny, of course, because Kenny actually didn't compete until Advanced Warfare, and then wasn't old enough to compete in CWL when they made the rule change for age. But these the other 3, Chino, I'm blanking on the names. Chino, Accuracy, and Theory, excuse me. They like have not been very good in boots era in jetpack games, and they came out and did so well in these 2Ks, and people were like, okay, they are doing really well online, but how much credit can you really give to a team doing well online? And so during the CWL bracket show, when I saw that their bracket was out, I basically just said, I think TK is kind of a dark horse team, even though they have a number, they were the number 3 seed, I think. They were the top seed in Pool C, I believe. But I said they're kind of a dark horse team, just because they had stuff to prove. Like they by no means, in my opinion, like going into the event, I would not have picked them to win the event, but they were definitely like my dark horse team. Like, hey, this team can definitely, do well if they're as good as they are online. And when we got to LAN and the map veto system kind of came into play, TK were just a superior team, basically just outplaying teams with the map veto.
Yeah, and it's crazy because TK is one of those teams. I was looking into their history a little bit. They've been around for a while. They've had really well-known players on their team. I mean, Nadeshot was on TK, I believe, at one point. Formal was on TK at one point, way back. And I say way back, it was like
Ghosts.
3 years ago or something like that.
Yeah. Formal was on Team Caliber for COD Champs Ghosts or Ghost COD Champs.
Yeah, and you look at their roster, like they've had really big name people on their team and just could never really find that run until now. And I'm curious, like, the team is new, right? They're newly played together. Is it just that it's boots on the ground and it's a completely different game and there's still teams that are getting adjusted? But is there anything else you picked up on that's like, how did they shoot up so quickly, being a fresh team together?
Well, Kenny, first of all, is an absolute beast. I mean, this kid, like, he was pretty good in Advanced Warfare, and then of course he disappeared. He goes to play Halo 5 like Hugh, because he can't, he's not old enough to compete in Call of Duty, and he comes back on World War II, and he literally just dominates. First off, like, just number one point, like, Kenny is really good at this game. He's like just a really fast sub player, and he makes just basically every player on the other team uncomfortable with how aggressive he is naturally. But besides that, TK had really good teamwork, I think, throughout that entire CWL Dallas event, just as far as like having good communication at all times, like really, having timely plays and just making sure that their communication and their teamwork was on point, basically, like, always trading in S&D, things of that nature. But besides that, they were the masters of Arden's Forest, and more specifically the map veto. Like like I said before, they really dominated the map in a lot of their series and kind of forced teams to play maps they were a little bit more uncomfortable with, and especially forcing teams to play Arden's Forest. TK seemed to be like by far and away the best team on Arden's Forest, and for some reason, teams weren't picking up on that and just kept being willing to play them.
Maybe a little overconfidence or something to that effect. And I'm curious, do you think they're, especially Kenny, do you think their all out aggression took teams by surprise, like teams expecting them to play, afraid, or like expecting them to play a little bit less aggressive? Do you think that played to their advantage of just all out aggression and just kind of surprising or overwhelming teams?
I don't think it caught them off guard how aggressive Kenny was naturally. I think, again, what did it most was just the fact that teams were literally just letting TK pick their best map. That they, not only their best map, but the team they were by far and away better than every other team at that LAN event. Like, teams were just like picking Arden's Forest into TK consistently throughout this whole event. And I mean, if you look at how well they did on the map, like no matter what the game mode was, like it was outstanding. And so I think that really was like the main contributing factor to their championship run.
Yeah, it was definitely exciting watching that run happen and seeing them move up through, semifinals and then ultimately in the finals, and seeing how much Splice struggled to just do anything against them really was, I mean, it was surprising. You know what I mean? You got to call it what it is. It was surprising to see, Europe's best team go up against this new roster of TK, and it was really impressive, and it was really awesome to see a team like that go the whole way and really show up and like, put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and just show up in a big way.
Yeah, Team Kaliber, like in that grand finals, it was kind of surprising because they, obviously Team Kaliber has had like a kind of long break because Splice, obviously just had to play Optic, and that match of TK versus Splice, like TK came out so hot, and then it seemed like Splice might, kind of, like they almost kind of like got that reverse sweep. They kind of almost got to that point where it's just like, okay, we're about to run this back, and then TK just clutched up on a game 5 S&D, and I'm pretty sure, I can't be 100% sure, but I'm about 98% sure that it was an Arden's Forest S&D to end the tournament. I know accuracy had a 1v4 on Arden's Forest S&D. I just can't remember if it was game 2 or if it was game 5.
Yeah, it was an insane run, and kudos to them, of course. I'm
Yeah.
excited to see what they're up to in the next event.
Well, I was gonna say I don't know if you heard, but because of how Northern Arena and the 2K tonight is going, they actually have already qualified for Pro League. They like even if they just bombed out of every single tournament, they have qualified because of how many points they're already ahead for Pro Points.
Well,
Yeah, they're
congrats to them. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're at I believe 114,000 or something like that, and Optic is in second with like 70 or something. Like they're just killing it right now.
Kudos. That's super awesome to see.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see a team that like potentially is going to give Optic a run for their money, because honestly, going into this year, I thought that there was just no chance that Optic was going to struggle on boots on the ground. And obviously, getting third at a tournament is not struggling, but when you're Optic, not getting first is struggling. So it's kind of like, it's kind of back and forth, however you see it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how this year turns out, because I think there's a lot of teams that have some veterans that really feel way more confident with boots on the ground, and they're going to give the entire league a run for their money for sure.
Yeah.
And that brings me to Northern Arena. You mentioned it just briefly, but like, what's the deal? First of all, what's the deal with the name? Like, every other event is CWL something, and then this one is Northern Arena Showdown, but it's also called CWL Montreal. But I didn't see it any like. Do you know what the deal is with the naming?
Well, Northern Arena is the organizer that ran the event. That's why. So it was like Northern Arena's event, because basically what happened was this event was not originally going to be a CWL like sanctioned event. It was just an invitational. But what they ended up doing was making it so that the top 8 placings of the event basically fit into placings for the 2K that was this weekend. So essentially CWL was like, okay, you're going to invite all these really good teams. We'll make it for Pro Points, because, if they make it, if they do the event and it's not for Pro Points, you're going to be less inclined as a pro team to go, obviously, because, you want to stay in the pool point race. So, yeah, so it kind of turned into CWL Montreal. But it was run by Northern Arena, which is kind of why it was, the Northern Arena Showdown or Invitational or whatever it's called.
Yeah, and of course Luminosity won that. What did you think of their run, and how impressive or not do they look to you?
So Luminosity is a tough one, because they were so good in all the 2Ks leading up to CWL Dallas. And then they kind of underperformed, and well, I shouldn't say kind of. They definitely underperformed at CWL Dallas. I mean, they got 7th, 8th, which for a team that gets top 2 in, I believe, 2 out of the 3 2Ks before Dallas, I want to say. I'm pretty sure it was 2 out of the 3. I mean, like, literally, they were only losing to Optic, basically, is the point I'm trying to make in these online 2Ks. And then they go to CWL Dallas, and they kind of, they lose. They lose in winners bracket, and then as soon as they went down to like into losers, they literally just lost their first losers bracket match. So, I don't, it's hard to say, because of course in this tournament for Northern Arena, you literally don't have the top 3 teams from the last event. You're missing Optic, you're missing TK, and obviously Splice is a European team, so they're not going to be invited because it's it's a North American invitational. But actually on paper, it would have been Faze Clan who was actually the team to beat going into the event based on placings from Dallas. But I think I actually going into the event, I said that I thought eUnited was going to win it, just based on what had happened at Dallas and kind of how I saw the bracket in this event. But for Luminosity to win, I think that kind of reassures analysts like me, and then also their fans, that hey, we're actually like still really good. Like 7th, 8th is kind of bad, we know, but like it's good enough to keep us in Pro League, and we're actually like a really good team. So don't be worried about us. I think is what this event says.
So what's it going to take eUnited to get back on top and like clinch a victory, clinch a major tournament?
Uh, you know, eUnited, it's kind of been an outlier, or not an outlier, excuse me. It's been like a really consistent thing with them, and I know a lot of the casters pointed it out at Dallas that eUnited does good when the Twins, Arcides and Prestini, do well for their team, and that seems to be the case moving forward for this team. But even with even if they have an event where those two are playing good and Clay is doing Clay as normal, I don't know that they just have. I just don't think they have it in this game. To be honest with you, I think they would need some help from the bracket to make it. It has to be a thing where they probably somehow play Luminosity in like a winners final or something like that, or I could see a scenario where they play Luminosity in a winners final, and then if they play Splice in, or if excuse me, if they play Luminosity in like a winners semi, and then play Splice in a winners final or something like that, that they could beat Splice and get to the grand finals. But even then, like if you play TK or Optic, and Optic or TK is coming from losers bracket, there's a good chance they're going to be hot, and I would take Optic or TK in two best of fives over eUnited before I would take eUnited in one best of five in that scenario. So I don't know. It would take a lot.
And you mentioned Faze just a minute ago. I'm curious, what was standing out to you for Faze as being like kind of a favorite going in? You know, outside of their showing at Dallas, but why was it one of your favorites going into the showdown?
Um, well, to be honest with you, Faze is really confusing, obviously, because of how bad they were in the 2Ks, and they had to play all the way through open bracket at Dallas. Um, but one thing that was really consistent was Zuma was very consistent with an SMG at Dallas, and replays, especially, was like MVP performance replays, like replays that I don't think we've ever even seen before with the FG42 at Dallas. And so for me it was like, okay, they were the highest placing team invited to the event. Well, I shouldn't say that were invited, that attended the event
Mm-hmm.
from Dallas. Um, and so for me it was like, if replays can be that good again, then this is a team that obviously like instantly becomes probably a top 3, top 4 team in World War II. But I think this kind of, I don't want to say brought them back down to earth, but I think this kind of assured me more going forward that this is more of a top 8 team than a top 4 team.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a lot of teams I feel like that fit that category, right? I mean,
Yeah.
TK being obviously winning Dallas, but TK you might even put in the middle of the pack there if without that win in Dallas. But what are some other teams that could have this Cinderella story similar to TK that have maybe some veterans or maybe even new players that you think just have that spark, or maybe could, if the bracket lines up, could have that run and maybe make a shot at top 3 or maybe even winning, and a team that we should be looking out for?
Well, the two teams that I'll say are that would fit that category are probably eUnited and Envy. And Envy is a team that going into this game I would have said is probably like a top 4 team, but they just haven't had the placings yet in this game. I mean, they finished, fifth, sixth at in Montreal, which is, when there's only 8 teams, fifth, sixth is not very good. That's the lower half. And then at Dallas, I believe they finished seventh, eighth. So they were the seventh, eighth team with Luminosity at Dallas. So those are the two. United and Envy are the two teams that I'm looking out for as far as like not necessarily a dark horse run, but those are the two teams that are like kind of underperformed, kind of not, but like I don't know that they can make it necessarily without a little bit of luck, but if they get that little bit of luck or catch fire, in an event, they can absolutely make deep runs in tournaments.
Now, what's your top 3 teams for NA and EU?
So like a combination, you mean,
Yeah,
or for in NA or in EU?
I would say let's go global, right? So let's
Okay.
say NA and EU combined, like
Okay.
global, like world rankings, how every other, well, not every other, but however many other sports do it. Let's say top 3
Yeah.
teams right now in Call of Duty.
I would say Optic Gaming won. Just because I think, I already talked about how Team Caliber really worked the veto system, things like that. I don't think that Optic is going to get worked in a veto system again if they play Team Caliber. Like I think if you run that, if Optic Gaming and TK had both been in the grand finals of this Montreal event, I think Optic probably wins it because they know what to expect kind of from TK. And despite TK winning one event and like the first major LAN of the game, and obviously they're still a top 3 team. Like I'd still put them in the top 3. I think Optic overall is probably still the best like overall team in the game so far. But then number two, I'd probably say Team Caliber, just because they won the first event,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, like, it's hard to not. It's so hard for me to say that Team Caliber isn't better than Optic when we literally saw them 3-0 Optic on LAN, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like no team, that is unheard of for teams to 3-0 Optic on a LAN setting, especially in like that deep in a tournament. So it's hard for me to keep them at 2 and not 1, but for right now I'm going to say 2 because I think in New Orleans we're probably going to see Optic win, and we're probably going to see Team Caliber like get second at that event is what I would guess. So this is kind of like, like I'm kind of making my top 3 based on kind of like predictions that I see moving forward. You
Yeah,
know
I
what I
like
mean?
it. I like it.
Yeah. And then in third, oh, see, this third is where it's like super hard because those are like Optic and TK are like the top two teams that are like for sure in my mind. And then when you get to third, it's like it's Splice who's so good, obviously. Like I mean to lose 3-0 to or not 3-0, excuse me, to lose to Optic and then 3-0 them to get to the grand finals. Again, we just talked about it. Like any team that 3-0's Optic, like that does not happen a lot. Which obviously, I mean, I guess it does because it happened twice in the same event, but
Yeah.
but it does not happen a lot. So for Splice to do it, obviously, like you have to put them top 3, but there's it's not fun to just say the top 3 teams from Dallas are the top 3 teams. So like, if I I would say Luminosity is probably third. It's so hard though because Luminosity and Splice for me, like if you play that series, if you play a best of 5 between those two teams like 10 times, it probably goes like Luminosity wins 5 of the series, Splice wins 5. Like that's literally how close I think those two teams are. So like I literally have to put a tie. Like I don't know who I would pick
Mm-hmm.
in that situation.
And going back to TK, I think winning Dallas was amazing for them, and then New Orleans is going to be like their, I don't know what you call it, but it's going to be like so. I feel like the pressure is going to be so immense
Yeah.
for them to show up and be like, no, we're legitimate. We can do this. We can be top and do it consistently.
Yep.
And I can't imagine, the pressure going into that event and being like all eyes are on you. The expectation is to win. And you're just like, I can't even imagine how crazy feeling that would be.
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest like storyline going into New Orleans is it's gonna be will TK be able to repeat? Like that is the headline of the newspaper for CWL.
And
New
like
Orleans.
like you just said, can you imagine Optic and TK in a final and TK wins? Like after they just beat Splice and then they go back and beat Optic, like that would be an insane, like the internet Call of Duty world would just would just explode.
I know. Oh my god. I would have a lot of content to make if that happened. I would have to be going back on a lot of my words, I think too. But yeah, it'll be crazy. I'm super excited for New Orleans. In about, I think is it less than a month now? I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head, but it should
Yeah.
be like it's in January, so it's it's like relatively soon.
Yeah. So talking about events, CWL, what MLG does, how they produce everything is really amazing. I haven't been to an event personally,
Mhm.
just seen it online so far, but I know people that have, and I've seen it online and everything, and everyone, on Twitter is gives them kudos for being so transparent and being really just really amazing event runners. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
this question goes to that event. What do you think about a Call of Duty Summit event like they do in CSGO? MLG does an amazing job. What do you think about changing it up and making it a little less formal of a thing where the players are interacting more, like the summit event type things?
Yeah.
And this is a question that I saw on the Cod Competitive subreddit by Druid00. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea because I really enjoy those summit events. I think that would be an interesting format that I don't think has been done before in Call of Duty. I'm curious what you think of, a different style of event to change it up and maybe introduce some new viewers to the experience.
Yeah. So I think that would be very beneficial, to be honest with you, because the Call of Duty scene for competitive is very much is like majority driven by the personalities in the scene itself. Um, so obviously, like the obvious example is like Scump and the members, and the other members of Optic. Like if you go on Twitch and you go on Call of Duty and one of the Optic members is streaming, they're going to have 10,000 more viewers than any other Call of Duty streamer, right? And like pros during 2Ks, they're always at the top streaming because people want to watch their favorite team play or watch their favorite pro play, this and that. So I think from a viewer perspective, it'd probably be really good because I think watching the watching the players just kind of interact with each other and talk about the game, I think is always going to drive up like high viewership. Um, so overall, I think it would be fun. I think it's hard to do because the format of CWL is so like um, not like I guess strict. Yeah, I guess the word I would want to use is strict. Like it's so like everything is like timely, everything is event like pre-planned, everything like that. So for CS:GO it's a little bit different because CS:GO is more like kind of like a golf or tennis kind of thing where it's like not a set schedule. It's kind of just like there's tournaments all year round. You go to whichever ones you're invited to or qualify for, or whatever the case may be. um, and so it's hard to kind of imagine an event like that taking place for CWL because it would have to be like a CWL sanctioned event, kind of like this Montreal one is. But I think the concept would be really cool.
Do you think, and I don't know as far as like media rights and stuff like that goes, but could an independent organizer set something up and be like, hey, we're having a Call of Duty, summit thing? Could the summit people do it? Or, could somebody else like that do it in this kind of format? And I obviously there maybe is media rights and licensing and
Mhm.
stuff like that goes along with it, but
Um,
you know,
Yeah, as far as organizers are concerned, absolutely. I mean, Northern Arena obviously did that. Northern Arena was just like, hey, we're gonna have a Call of Duty event. We're gonna invite the best teams we can. And CWL was just like, sure. I mean, yeah, we'll make it. Like I obviously I wasn't in the meeting room, but essentially Northern Arena said we're gonna host an event, and CWL was like, sure. We'll help. We'll not help run it, but we'll sponsor it or whatever, and make it worth pro points. So I think from an organizer perspective, it's certainly possible. I think if CWL wants to keep it like, because here's the thing, the pull of a summit event is that it's kind of like casual and it's kind of laid back and things like that, and it's not as professional. So I think CWL just has to ask themselves, how professional do we want this circuit to be, right? Because if they want to bring in events like Summit, then of course, like I think that's fun, and I think that's like a great alternative, and I think it actually would drive up a lot of viewership for a Call of Duty event, just because it's again driven by the personalities or the player personalities versus, the casters. But I think overall, it's hard to envision that happening again, just because I think CWL is trying to be very professional and kind of show off console esports to the global market.
Mm-hmm. Now, this next question I have is requires your prediction wizardry cap, and it's about like the future. And what do you think will be the next big esport on console or PC or mobile or something else? Like as a whole, what do you think is the next big esports that we're all going to be talking about?
See, it's hard because there's so many esports that are like sort of on the come up, like they're like halfway there to like being really good. Like the ones that come to mind are like Rocket League. Like Rocket League is the one that like I think a lot of people kind of say, because it's like it's pretty popular and it's like a really fun game to play, but it hasn't like gone like full like 100K viewership main stage, things like that. But I think Rocket League is there. Overwatch, I think, as an esport, like just had its like rapid growth, and I think it's gonna get massive once the Overwatch League starts out. Like I know a lot of people are criticizing kind of like how fast the Overwatch League started, but I actually do think it's gonna succeed, just because when you look at the product and you look at who's backing it and you look at the player base, it's kind of impossible to fail, in my opinion. Very similar to how Call of Duty is a little bit. But Overwatch is even more so than Call of Duty from the sense of it's impossible to fail.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be exciting with so many games coming out, new games coming out with so many games getting updates and everything. A lot of people I follow on Twitter are like, Fortnite's going to be amazing and like surpass PUBG, and it's like it's just good. 2018 is going to be super exciting on a number of different fronts.
Yeah, PUBG's a good one too for upcoming esports. I know, like I've watched a couple of H1 events when H1 was kind of like coming up, and I actually haven't played like too much PUBG. Like I've watched a pretty good amount of it, but I really haven't played it too much. I played a lot of H1. I kind of played myself out of battle royale games, to be honest, before PUBG even came out, because I just played so much H1 when it was first out. Because it's just H1's a really fun game to play. Like if you just have a bunch of friends to just go on and try to win like fives and things like that. And I know like when fives ranks came out for H1, like it was crazy trying to get like high ranks, but yeah, PUBG is definitely another one that I could see blowing up here pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see what happens in 2018. Like you said, there's so many different games that could, with the right combination of developer support and like the community, bringing more attention to it and playing it and streaming it, it's going to be super, super exciting. And so lastly, if you have any shout outs or anything you'd like to plug or anything like that, the mic is yours, and shout away.
Okay. Well, first I'd like to thank / plug CODGamepedia, obviously, because they help spread my content, and they do a great job updating the website, updating all the Twitter fans, because obviously Twitter is a huge following for Call of Duty. So I definitely want to shout out them. And then besides that, I also want to shout out Hardpoints, which is the podcast with Merk and TP, who are two ex-Call of Duty pros, now analysts. I just want to shout that out just because that podcast, like if you're a Call of Duty competitive fan watching this, I very much would recommend watching that, just as something to stay very informed. I think they do like a really good job, and they're very insightful with Call of Duty, and a lot of the stuff I get and that kind of stirs my thought even comes from their show. So
awesome. We'll make sure we plug everything and make sure everything is linked up for you and for that podcast and everything that you mentioned, CODGamepedia and everything like that. So just super, super appreciate you coming on the show tonight and taking some time to talk about TK's Cinderella story and Call of Duty and in esports in general. It was super fun, and really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, and I wish you continued success with what you're doing, and I look forward to seeing the content that you're creating and how you're progressing with your content and your with what you're doing with your journalism, and just super excited to see the future of esports in 2018.
Yeah.
And with that, I just want to remind everyone that if this all goes as planned, this show is just the beginning. Hey everybody, real quick before you go, super appreciate you listening. Hope you enjoyed the content of this episode. I hope you enjoyed the Call of Duty conversation that I had. I hope you had a tremendous Christmas. I hope you had a great year. I hope you are a continued listener for 2018. I have some really awesome stuff in store for this year, this coming year. So I just really appreciate you listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave me a rating on iTunes. Super helps me a lot, get exposure, and helps me reach new fans and new audience, new people that might enjoy it. Second of all, subscribe. Helps me know that you're liking it, know that you're enjoying the content. And third, share this. Do me a solid, share this on social media, share it on Twitter, tag at Esports Narrative, tweet us at the show, let us know what you thought, and share it with a few friends. We would greatly appreciate it. And when I say we, I mean we right now, because I am on the hunt for a content creator, an editor, a producer, an editor-in-chief of sorts. So if you're into that, if you want to help me create micro content for this podcast and little snippets to put on social media to promote the show, if you're good with Adobe Premiere, Sony Vegas, if you can edit audio and video and preferably do a little Photoshop, do a little editing, written editing, so to speak, on the blog post for these episodes, give me a shout. There's a link to a Google form on Twitter. Check that out if you're interested. Fill it out. Would love to do some work together. Volunteer basis, hit me up. And again, thank you for listening. I will talk to you again next time.